Welcome back to the news. Still with me, Chukwuma, and now straight to the conversation segment. The federal government has included Chinese language, Mandarin, into the curriculum, and a lot of conversations has been going around if it's necessary, especially where we are in our education sector. And to look at this further, I've been joined by Chukwuma Ephraim Okenwa, the Executive Director, Lead Network Africa. Welcome to the show, sir.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you so much for joining me.
Yeah, thank you.
Now, let's start with where the education system is in Nigeria at the particular time. What do you think about the education system at this point?
Well, I think our system is evolving, though not without challenges. We've seen like some efforts in terms of revising the curriculum to see that that is consistent with emerging realities. And the need to put Nigeria on the path of recovery by bridging the gap between the institution and industry. So sometimes you see like, some tweaking of some course subjects from maybe ICT to digital technologies on the need to make it more digital inclined and not just the traditional ways of learning ICT. And then we also see like the enhanced need to connect young persons back to their history. And then of course the need also to rejig the civic education, you understand, to foster more social cohesion, right? So you now have like social and civic education all integrated, and with the goal of, producing better citizens, that can help to bridge the obvious gap that we see in terms of citizen rights and responsibilities, in terms of building the nation of our dream.
True. Now, looking at the new curriculum and the addition of the Chinese language, what's the relevance? What's actually the benefit? Because I remember in secondary school, we did French, and to be honest, it was just another subject we did in school. So what's the relevance of adding Chinese into the curriculum?
Okay, so learning a foreign language, it's a kind of gives some level of advantage. Interestingly, it's optional. So that means if you want to like build any strategic interest with China in the future, then it's going to be a brilliant idea learning the language. I can tell you like language actually helps to like collapse, whatever like obstacle that exists, between two people, because basically when you go to China, you want to do transaction, you have to like speak in English and then with a device, have that translated in China. But for some of us that love languages, learning language, when we speak the little we learn, they're excited. So it has a way of like fostering friendship, whether you're in Paris or maybe somewhere in Shanghai, right? Or maybe like Paris, of course, in France, if you speak French there. Or maybe like speak Mandarin in maybe either you are in Beijing or Shanghai, right? Or Suzhou, any of the Chinese cities, it has a way of like connecting, right? It builds friendship. So I see that first and foremost, because many Nigerians, I see several reactions. In fact, I was watching a YouTuber who says, so very soon we'll start saying "ni hao," right? Some of those, common Chinese words and stuff. He was making a fun of it. But the interesting thing actually is to understand that China is not just a nation, right? It's currently, we have like in diplomacy, two major spheres of influence. And you talk about China and the United States of America. And interestingly, I also want people to understand that as complex as the Chinese language might seem, it's one of the world languages, the United Nations languages, that when the business of diplomacy is done, right? I mean, you have it translated to 6 languages concurrently, 6 booths, and China is one of them, Russian language, and of course Arabic and Spanish. Then the 2 principal languages that is seen as the diplomatic languages, that of course if you know all other ones like this, any of these 4, you also like need to have an edge, because the diplomatic languages is English and French, but the United Nations languages or world languages also include China, right? And considering the population and the very fact that the alliance with China between China and Nigeria, I think also creating that opportunity, right? You know, for Nigerians to foster that strategic interest for maybe those that want to go to China, maybe to study, right? Especially in the aspect of technology. I mean, China is top notch when it comes to technology. And I can tell you like why disruptional. And then also maybe those that want to foster strategic interest in trade, you could make it a lot easier. So what I want, you know, because for those that are pandering different narratives of Nigeria has been sold, the English we are speaking now, your papa language, right? It's another, and every language, any nation that feel you've come of age, right? You know, you also have every prerogative, right? To foster what you call cultural diplomacy. You want more people, right? Just like today, there's a possibility many people around us will be dressed like the English person. In fact, when you wear your Ishiago sometimes, right, as a young person, it's like you are, you know, living in the ancient times. I mean, you know, so when you dress in the normal way of a British person. So if China sits down and say, you know what, we also want as part of the way to like foster our relationship across board. We want to like foster also like, you know, cultural diplomacy through education. Like we have a lot of Confucius Center now, imagine in Nigeria. Let more people learn our language, and also like let's foster that through like, okay, people who want some forms of exchange programs, right? In China and all the rest of it, you know, want them to come. That is strategic.
Okay. All right. Now, looking at, you've mentioned the benefits or, you know, the significance of this new language, but there is this concern of how prepared are we looking at that it's being planned to be implemented in 2025-2026 academic session. How prepared are we as a country to implement this in our curriculum and ensure that it's being thought well? Because I still can remember in secondary school, French wasn't something many people look forward to. And even if there are people that develop further or wanted to study it further, it had to be extra lessons aside from school.
Now let me say something. Maybe we can't really generalize that French was not, like French class was one of the best for me, and I still remember some of those things. Little did I know I would be a diplomat in the future, right? But then like French, I mean, I can remember a couple of French, and when I try to like speak to some extent, you might think I've lived in French, but most of the things I learned, yes, I've been to Paris, I've been to Geneva, like some of French cities, but beyond that, most of the French I learned was in Enugu, French teacher, right? So part of it would be to know the collaboration that the federal ministry is building with China, because China is a bit, I mean, you can't just find, you know, people that can speak China pretty well, just anywhere. So part of it might be like sending some Chinese back to, and I'm sure the Chinese government will gladly want to do that, or building the capacity. So I think the only challenge would be in who to teach the French, and looking at the scale. We are talking about like being able to provide that manpower for all of the people, because sometimes we adopt policy like entrepreneurship was adopted and we still teach it like theory. You know, when 34 trade courses and entrepreneurship courses was adopted about 7 years ago, where you have courses like auto spraying, right? You know, you have fashion and designing, you have fishery, all of those things. We thought it's going to help to bridge the gap, but you know what many schools do? Even if when you choose data processing, like I tell people interestingly, in Nigeria we teach computer as a subject without computers, right? So you are teaching computer without computers.
Open to university.
Same also we've introduced entrepreneurship courses study here in the universities. And what do you see happen? Right, business proposal, theory, everything. You know, the goal of having every child graduate with a skill, right? You know, to be self-independent is still, so it's still like another level of an amateur, or just still learn how to write proposal, right? And we know that proposal, you know, in many cases is not as successful as having someone on the table, right? Just making a reference and you say, you know what, oh yeah, boy, and guy, just give, you know, do him that privilege, right? You know, many young persons write proposal and then, you know, get to the point they are so discouraged they wouldn't want to try another one.
All right. Okay. Now let's look at another angle where people are coming from, saying that this is going to be a threat to our own Nigerian languages. Do you think it's a threat to us? And also looking at that, it is not really strong. Like our language is not being strongly taught in schools, and now we are being another implementation of a foreign language into our system.
Is it like, okay, so see the thing, I mean, at the moment, like I know, Igbo language at least from senior primary now with the revised subjects, and of course junior secondary is still compulsory, right? Okay, so and I think parents also have a great role in not just teaching the children the language, but also in making them to take pride. Because I think most of the problem comes from home, where you teach a child to think that being brilliant is the ability to speak without English. Because sometimes you even see some schools advertise that they teach with British accent. So you see somebody struggling, right? Manefo original egama. When you see somebody, when you travel out, right, and you see somebody speak with the pure British accent, you know this is Brit, right? You know, needless of like trying to form. Accent actually is what distinguishes people, right? It's like Olunde. Like when an Nkano man speak the same Igbo, you know, or an Nsoka man, there should be that difference. Why would I want to speak like a British person? Why? Right, in my black skin. Allow British to speak like British, right? And the moment we understand that, there wouldn't be any room for low self-esteem, right? In fact, interestingly, right, you know, our national policy on education also provides that a child can be taught in the local languages. And that is what's reasonably expected. Travel across the globe, there is that room. But since we live in a nation where English is our lingua franca, the way we can combine the two would be that maybe if you are teaching, like I've taught maths, I love teaching maths. You're teaching a child maths, right? If you speak English, you break it down in Igbo language, and the person will understand. That's the advantage that language have. But let me say something that adopting other language and even giving options for those that have interest. I mean, the world is so big and so interconnected, right? Whether it's German language, as many as you want to, there may be a child in that classroom whose dream is to spend all his life in China, in Russia, in any place. So making those provisions, provided you don't make it compulsory. Anybody that they tell and say, come on, this is not compulsory, you have option, and the person is saying, are you compelling me to learn Chinese? Then something somewhere is wrong. So let's allow those. Let's also understand that the fact that, I mean, recently when I was in China, right, I met some Nigerians. They can speak China without any single English or Igbo. So the fact that it's complex is because there have not been that opportunity, right? You know, for people to really learn, right? I took some Chinese classes and even had the opportunity of learning some things, right? Like because many of them, they can't speak typical English. So when they come to lecture, they will speak in French, and maybe you have on the screen, right? You know, automatic translation into English language. And I found out that impression that it's a very difficult language is simply because they have not been that opportunity to learn it on a close range. You know, starting with the alphabets, of course.
All right, definitely. Okay, now to round off the news, I think we're already out of time. In 30 seconds, can you explain, like, if this is finally or successfully implemented, what does the success look like maybe in the coming years?
Well, I think what I think I would recommend would be like to start in clusters, right? You know, maybe upscaling it on this might be premature because, of course, you talk about the manpower. We need people to teach Chinese. Definitely. So the question would be, are you going to like, you know, do like a quick makeshift programs, right? You know, where people just begin to teach, like at the end of the day, the China you've learned is the one that can be used in our back.
Yes, all right. Thank you so much for your time. Now,